Suppose, Lord Russell, this film were to be looked at by our descendants, like a Dead Sea Scroll in 1,000 years' time. What would you think it's worth telling that generation?
Mind spins and spirals like the card cogito. I think, therefore, but do I even know? Hume said the sun might not rise in the morning. Patterns ain't proof, just habits we adorn. Russell's teapot floating out in the void. Invisible doubts that can't be destroyed. Belief ain't a bird and the skeptic employs. Question the noise, the cosmos ploys. Skeptic's eyes always peeping the fraud. Truth ain't handed down, it's wrestled from the gods. Doubts my temple, my faith is flawed. Think it through twice before I applaud. Induction wobbles like a table with no leg. Hume's knife cuts leave certainty begging. A billion white swans, blowing black renegade. Shatter the mirror, the cracks cascade. Cogito feels strong, but is it really? Thoughts build castles, clouds act silly. Russell's pot spins in the ether so freely. Prove it exists or the claim's too dreamy. Am I the dreamer or the dream in the show? The car wrestled devils, still didn't know. Faith and senses, they play tricks on a low. Truth's the mirage in the desert of woe.
When you are studying any matter or considering any philosophy, ask yourself only what are the facts and what is the truth that the facts bear out. Never let yourself be diverted either by what you wish to believe or by what you think could have beneficent social effects if it were believed. But look only and solely at what are the facts.
Hello, everyone. I'm Robert with Skeptic Philosophy, and welcome to the show. Today's subject, we're talking about purpose. I wanted to start by telling everyone Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and all of the rest. It is the holidays. I hope to enjoy the holidays with my family here, and I hope everyone else does also. The subject that we're talking about today, and I do hope that we start getting a few people in here on the subject. You just make a check right quick. Yep, streaming in public. Okay. We're going to talk about purpose. And starting with what we classically call the 5 W's, where we always use these 5 W's in every question that we ever pose and ever ask. If we don't use the word itself, the essence of the question is to attain one of the who, what, where, when, or whys. And this is just the nature of every question. So in large part, we think the who, what, where, and when is a concept that to some degree an animal or some animals can process that, can have a concept of the who, what, where, and when, in sense that they can recognize an individual that they have seen before. We've all seen this with dogs and whatnot, that the dog knows one person from another person and can have certain emotional interactions from one person to the next. As far as where, many animals know different locations and can understand things spatially, not just in a localized or small area, but in a much larger area. Some elephants being some of the best examples of tracking all the way back. And the who, what, where, the what objects that they know, specific toys or things that they have, their beds or whatever. So that we already have the who, what, where. There's a slightly less animals obviously are all able to have some kind of temporal understanding, but to the degree that they have a sensation of time and that they can tell when it's closer to the time, such as a dog might come and wait by the door when it knows that a master is about to come home. It does have a sense of time and a sense of when to some degree, though it can't formalize that. I don't know that any animals formalize time outside of us, but the why has been always the big question. It has been the huge question, and there are 2 sets of whys. And in reality, I think one of the sets of whys animals do to a large degree have some understanding of it. And the 2 different types of whys are the why that is the causal why, and it's the why that I think some birds may understand. For example, crows that can figure out puzzles by putting a rock inside of water, and then it'll make it it'll make the water level rise up. So clearly it has some sense of interaction of cause and effect. So in that sense, it has an understanding of cause why, or one side of the cause. There's two types of causes primarily. But anyway, it has an understanding of the cause. But there is a larger teleological why that is trying to draw a larger holistic framework of why. But why? But why? And this is something that we don't think. We don't think there are any animals outside of humans that are doing this kind of why. So that might be something that's quite unique to us. And I think that is kind of the beginning. It is the cornerstone of where the notion of purpose might arise. With that having been said, I'm going to divide this, because this actually is quite a complex subject, being purpose. I'm going to divide this into three different modes or ways of talking about purpose, so that we know kind of what category of mode that we're talking in. The best that I can tell, the way that we can divide these, and there's ways to divide this as far as time and how that the modes develop. But I think the first one is the biological and neurological foundation of how it is operating at a neurological level, of what is going on that is causing the sensations, that is causing the will to find purpose, the will to create teleological why. And that is the biological and neurological side. And then we have what is, I would call, the operations side. How do we define this in terms? This is things such as emotional value, cognition, and social consensus. And these are more of operators and like how we understand this ideal of purpose. And then the third one I would say is a phenomenal or experiential, which is what most people, when they talk about purpose, well, what's your purpose? They think about it in the phenomenal sense, and they try to explain things or say that there are these goals or things that are their purpose, or they might throw that onto something much larger than themselves and say that my purpose is to be subservient to, or to yield to my will to this larger construct. And more often than not, that's a God in some sense. But it's not always necessarily the case that it's a God. So I think these are the three primary categories in which we generally talk about the subject. I think it's the three, and maybe it could be divided a little more, but I think this is enough to understand the context of our conversation. Famously, it was Nietzsche who said, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. And I think that's a great quote, because that is the sensational. That is the third one. That is the phenomenal sense of, I have a purpose and I feel this in an intuitive and internalized sense. I feel a why. There are questions that we can divide into both a causal why and into a teleological why, and we tend to divide them instinctively into a teleological why when there's no good reason to think that there is a larger framework of teleology that we can lock this why in. And I'll give you a primary example. When someone drops their phone, for example, and let's say their phone goes into the water and it's damaged, they might say, why? But what they're asking why, we clearly know they're not asking the causal why. They're not asking what neurons that fired in their brain that made their hand loose and what led to it dropping in the why. There is a sense of a larger teleological why, as if this thing was being controlled by something, or if there was some fate that might have its hand upon this, when there's no good reason to ask that question. Yet we see people do this all the time. When tragedy strikes, they're quick to say, and even a smaller tragedy such as losing a phone in the water, they're quick to say, why? As if this means something, as if this statement has any meaning in the larger teleological framework. It clearly doesn't. But we can do other whys like trees, like why do trees grow? And we can say, in the sense of what is the causal functions that are the steps, the mechanical interactions that are causing the tree to grow, or we can be saying, but why do trees grow? You know, what is the purpose of trees growing? And again, over and over, we're trying to couch things in a larger holistic framework that we're trying to understand this function upside the other functions and other actions that are going on in the world. And this is trying to see it in a larger framework, what I would call a holistic framework of what we're seeing. Our brain is seeing patterns, our brain is seeing things, and we're trying to understand them and what they mean. And subsequently, we wind up, we have the first layer of why, and then we have a second layer of why. Daniel Dennett famously, and I believe there should be a link in the description, he famously used the example of ice in one of his lectures or one of his public speakings. But he said, but why does ice float? And there's two ways to see this. There is obviously the causal mechanism as to which causes ice to float. And then there is the ideal of the larger teleological, but like, why does this happen this way? And those that latch on to larger purpose structures, such as ideals of God or whatnot, might say that it floats, or God wants it to float, because of, and then have something by which ice has, the act of ice floating has made that thing successful, and then say, because of that success, they build the why, the teleological why. I'll give you a primary example. We might say, if ice did not float, we would not have Native Americans that got to America, because we would not have had the land bridge. And that might be one of the most significant things that the act of ice floating has contributed to that, as far as what relates to humans, what we're concerned about. So that is one of the larger geographical movements and one of the most historically significant changing from one location to another. We've come to inhabit the country of America, or this area of America, and that happened because ice floats. So we could say, in a teleological framework, if we're trying to draw a larger conclusion about this, we could say, but why teleologically does ice float? And we could come to some conclusion because God wanted the Native Americans to make it to America. Or you could throw in just a handful of a bunch of other little scenarios that ice floating and being able to travel across ice might have been extremely beneficial, or a vast number of other things. And you're kind of backwards working, you're building all of that into your larger why question. And that's how you wind up fulfilling something teleological, that okay, that works as a structure, and now I have a why it all happened to start with, when in reality you're just trying to piece things together to get a more holistic view, and you're trying to associate that holistic view with a causal why. And I think that's what's happening at the biological level. And with that having been said, I do want to see if I can pull a video here. We're going to open chat in a little while. Hopefully we'll open chat in about 40 minutes or so, so that people can come in. But I'm going to see if I can get a video posted on here right quick. Well, I probably need to open that video to start with. One moment. All right, let's see if that'll work. Sorry for the delay on this. I'm gonna screen share, Windows. Hopefully this comes in pretty decently here. This is from a book. This is from Why We Believe. The Why We Believe book is, or Why We Believe What We Believe is from neuroscience. I encourage you to check it out. Also, the link in the description is on this. This is coming out of the chapter, Seeing the Forest from the Trees, which gives an inside look of kind of what we think's happening that's causing the sensation or the feeling that we generally associate with purpose. That having been said, I'm going to play this for a minute. Hopefully Buddhist meditation attempts to teach practitioners how to accentuate holistic awareness by temporarily suspending the process of logic. In comparison, Western religious practices tend to be more reductionist, often applying causal reasoning and logic to build a theology. However, Western religious traditions also have rich mystic elements and a holistic awareness in which the practitioner can feel connected with the universe or God. Does holistic thinking offer a more accurate or integrated view of the world? A few years ago, our radiology staff had a chance to test this hypothesis in a very particular way. We compared the differences between human and computer evaluation of the brain scans, thinking that a computer might accurately quantify which parts of the brains were not functioning normally, leading to a more precise diagnosis. To our surprise, humans using their intuitive holistic skills did slightly better than the computer, most likely because we derive information from various patterns in the entire scans that help us in our diagnosis. Thus, we are born with two hemispheres that will, over time, develop two distinct different worldviews. Our consciousness does not like this very much. The right side of the brain wants to exclaim, "This is it. This is the whole picture." But the left side intrudes, saying, "No, you're wrong. Look at all the inconsistencies and differences and pieces of the puzzle that have been ignored." Neurological studies seem to confirm this inner conflict by showing that each person is capable of thinking both ways, though not necessarily at the same time. However, the brain also depends on maintaining two distinct worldviews, because people who have suffered from a stroke to either side of the brain often find themselves living in a disjointed world. For some, the world will be logical and reasonable, but with no sense of meaning or purpose. Others may find themselves feeling peaceful and content, but lacking any intellectual interests or motivations. Thus, we need both sides of our brain and both functions to feel satisfied and whole. Holistic awareness, like other forms of subjective experiences, may be emergent properties that arise from a vast network of interconnected neural processes. Self-recognition of the internal experience might even be the ultimate expression of the holistic function when we realize that the parts, the neurons, the cognitive processes, etc., can be considered only in relation to the whole. This then would be what gives us an overall feeling of satisfaction and of being a part of the world. That was a small usurp from a book that is talking about this kind of holistic thing, and the idea that there is a left brain and right brain that are doing two different functions here. And the one function is also obviously at a micromanagement level, that it's trying to see the smaller components. And we are all pattern-seeking mammals. What we're trying to gather data from is we're gathering data from what we see, and we're making some small predictive models in our mind and trying to understand the most about, get the most amount of information from the information that we're seeing. So when we see something, whether it's a brain scan image that he used as an example, and with the people inside of radiology, they're seeing small things, and they might be seeing things that are a tiny pattern. And the computer, the AI at the time, I think he wrote this book in 2006. So obviously AI has come a long ways from there. And I don't know about AI inside of the medical field as to what he's using, but it's recognizing patterns in tiny things that's going on in the brain. But in this case, the humans are able to look at other inconsistencies that might not line up with the concept of that what we might initially see inside of the pattern. They might see other things that are happening. And while one side of their brain might initially say, well, what's going on here in the brain is X, the larger picture, that the holistic framework that the other side of the brain is looking at is saying, no, there's something else going on here. There's more happening. And then there's a little bit of a tug and war back and forward between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, with the right hemisphere being satisfied almost equation-like, almost mathematically, like, no, this is all that's here. And the left hemisphere looking at larger holistic framework and saying, no, there's more that's going on here. And in this case, and in the vast majority of cases, we can gain more information by zooming out more. And the more that we have this cognitive operations happening from the right and the left hemisphere that says, well, there's the little picture, but I need to understand it in a larger, bigger context, the more we're actually able to understand larger patterns. So functionally, this has been extremely beneficial for humans to be able to do this. The problem lies in is when both of these voices are done and analyzing a subject and they see the smaller things, and we say, well, I understand the smaller components, but when the larger view cannot get a larger view and get a satisfaction that it says, okay, now I understand the giant holistic framework, it can't get that. It's left of a state of not understanding the larger holistic framework. And when we have a disconnect between these two is when he mentioned that when patients have damage from a stroke, when we have components of the right hemisphere or the left hemisphere that are damaged and we're having communication problems, they are left feeling like they have no meaning, or left feeling like that they're in a state of without purpose. And that sensation of purpose is being created from the interaction of the finite things and the patterns of the finite things, and the holistic saying that there's a bigger picture here, and that these small things, that maybe the small things that are happening in my life, maybe the small things that I'm doing as an action, that they're a part of a bigger thing. So this is where the sensation comes from at the neurological level as to how we feel meaning inside of our life, inside of a meaningful context. Then we get inside of these operations such as cognitions and emotional values and whatnot. And I actually think I do have a link on a book here. I haven't made a pre-recording or anything on this one, but I am going to pull it open. And this is supposed to be, let me see if I can put it on the screen here. This is from the same book where it gives a framework of belief and how belief works. Actually, before I get into all of that, I have the subject of belief itself is a very interesting thing, that we have all of these internal frameworks that compel us to do certain actions. For example, we might have a wolf that, or there's several animals, not just wolves, that have this compulsory, but when they're thirsty, they intuitively feel like they have to go downhill. There is an impulse to go downhill. And this is evolutionarily rewarded, because the impulse to go anywhere else is going to be less successful in finding water than the impulse to go downhill, because water flows where it flows. Subsequently, animals that have the instinct that when they're thirsty to go downhill, this instinct is rewarded more and more in the evolutionary process. So what we have is all these different functions that are going on inside of the head. And we have a lot of different animals that even have design functions, that they know how to build a thing. Like a weaver spider might build the exact same pattern that its parent organism did, but never actually see its parent organism. But it knows how to build that exact web. We have dirt daubers that build homes exactly the same as their parent organism. And this is something that is locked in them as a genetic memory, that they make these arches, that they build them slowly but surely. They make these little arches, and then they stack the arches on the top of one another, and they layer them out, and they make a cocoon. And they're not taught how to do this. This is something that is genetically inherent inside of them to be able to do this action. But that means that this exists somewhere inside of the cognitive framework. We have different neurological interactions that are happening that will always bring forth the desire to make this thing. And what's interesting with all of the internal impulses that every animal has, The one thing that seems most unique about humans is we have one of these that are able to adjust and change on the fly. It's a neurological framework that isn't locked. And this is what I would like to call beliefs. We have neurological frameworks that framework can be disadvantageous, and the person can see it inside of their life that it's not advantageous to operate under that framework, and they can change it, and then they've thus changed their belief. So it's not just a cognitive framework that they get once whenever they're born, and that they have this cognitive structure, such as that which might compel them to go downhill, or that which might compel them to build a thing in a certain way, but rather instead they have a flexible, moving cognitive framework that says, I believe this thing, whether that's a value set or what I value, or whether that's a belief about what the nature of reality is. That they could think fire, for example, isn't hot, and they can interact with it, and now this is a new belief. Or maybe they don't even have to touch the fire, they can feel the heat off of it, and they already have an interworking framework that heat equals increase or equals pain, that they have a sense of increase of scale. So they might even be able to come to the conclusion when they see fire that as they get closer to it and feel the heat, I'm not going to touch this because I believe this is going to burn me. And they can make these beliefs and these changes in the cognitive structure, and this is very beneficial. And I think that humans have refined this belief function greater than any other animal has, that we can have beliefs and have flexibility in beliefs, and that we can have beliefs about the nature of the world, about political structures, about all of these different structures we can have, and those adjustabilities are very pragmatic to us. The ability to change on the fly. This is getting very similar to what Richard Dawkins used in memes, where he said that they're the evolution of memes, and I think Daniel Dennett later wrote on this subject as well. But it's very similar to that. And getting to the subject of purpose, let me see if I got this page up here. This is, well, oh, I did have it open. Let me get to the right page on it. I think it's page 22. I'll go ahead and put it on the screen for now. All right, let me find it. I think it's in page 22 here. I've made some notes here. Yeah. Blow it up a little bit. And again, I encourage everyone to read this book. This is a great book. It deals primarily with belief, but it has applications just in everything about purpose. So the ideal here of how the belief systems are working is an interaction. And it is, you see as on the diagram, that you have perception, that you have cognition, you have social consensus, and you have emotional value. And he goes on and to say in here, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he talks about having a volume control on these things. And that what happens that makes it more prevalent is how we adjust its volume and how much weight we wind up giving to that thing. So we might have something like a social consensus if more people believe that. In fact, when we do see something that the other senses that are not if we have a problem inside of the inside of the perception, the cognition, and the emotional evaluation, if we see something and we have a problem in those three, we immediately turn to someone else to say, are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? So that we get some kind of consensus that there's an agreement upon what we're seeing or what we think we're understanding in the aggregate, perhaps, of patterns. So that's where like social consensus comes in. And what happens more often than not is when we do have we do have certain predilections that we all have. Some person might explore those predilections and say, well, I feel like I have, for example, a purpose. I feel like I have a bigger, more divine purpose, or that some entity might be calling me. And then this social consensus slowly starts to come in with, yeah, I feel that too. I feel that there's a bigger holistic why, and that bigger holistic why, that even if I can't understand it all inside of the context of the larger holistic framework, that's why I'm here. And these things begin to take part. But these are why some of the sensations arise as it relates to larger meanings that we couch what we do on a day-to-day basis. We couch them inside of those larger meanings. And I think that's one of the things that goes on inside of the notions of purpose. Now, I have wrote on the subject of purpose before myself, and I wrote a pretty big chapter on it in my book a few years back. And I dealt with purpose primarily here in the emotional sense, in the third way. I dealt with it in the third mode, so to speak, and that only. And that's the phenomenal experience of purpose and what it is to feel purpose and to feel like we have purpose. And I wanted to say that there are two distinct things that we feel inside of this sensation. There is the purpose that we might have for ourselves, that we feel a purpose for us individually, and then there might be our connection of what we feel a larger, more holistic purpose. And these seem to be two distinct things. And the larger, more connection to the universe kind of sensation of purpose is largely being created by these two drivers of looking at patterns and trying to get teleological whys. But I think the other purpose, in the sense that, I'm sorry, I'm just going to straighten this out. I've been wearing that hat. The other purpose that we have, I think that's more of a personal one. And we have this problem sometimes disconnecting, like evolution. If there's anything that sets something that's a larger purpose, it's probably the processes of evolution, that it is setting it in an algorithmic way, that what it is rewarding, it is placing from the algorithm that which goes in the survive and that which goes in the not survive category. And all that which is on the not survive category is not alive. So we don't even have them in the world of interaction. Those that we have in the world of interaction are those that the algorithm of evolution places inside of the category of survival. So there seems to be something of an emergent evolutionary purpose, if you want to look at a larger context. There seems to be the sensation, at very least, that to live is always at a core. It's one of those drivers that are the cognitive framework. In whatever way it gets built into different animals, there exists some sort of small cognitive framework that is to live, and that it is always prevalent. It is always there. And we may not even think about it unless something challenges it. And the ideal is that it challenges, or it creates fear in us that we might not live, or that something might cause us to not live. And then that arisal of that sensation, that arisal of that cognitive framework causes us to fear. No, don't go that way. Don't jump from that plane. Don't do this thing. Because there is that cognitive framework that compels us to live. So we might say, in some sense, that's some type of larger overarching purpose, but that's very unfulfilling to the sensations, to the qualia of our notion of internal purpose. And it's very unsatisfying. That having been said, we do also have the kind of universal connection that we feel something bigger. There's a lot of literature on this, and I did place in the link in the description about a a paper that was written on the what is the name of them? The Aborigines out of Australia, and particularly how they behave about fires and their rituals concerning fires and group fires. And not just this paper, but there's been a lot of papers and history that's been written on the interaction of tribes and how tribes treat fire. Tabula's, I'm sorry, not Tabula. I'm trying to think what the professor and psychologist wrote on this, Totems and Taboos. He touched on this subject years ago. I probably should have refreshed on this if I was going to mention it at all. But he touched on this subject of fires a little bit in centralized icons, that we have a central thing of which, in the case of the fire, that it is the life-giving thing that creates a community. It's the fire, the campfire that is inside of a tribe, going all the way back to cavemen, is the first central area. It's the first area that is a public space. It's the public gathering location. And this fire has a lot of meaning to the groups. And we've seen some literature talk about people that they don't sit at the same fire, that they sit at another fire. The idea that they're not from that tribe. They don't even get their life or have responsibilities to maintain or keep the fire of that camp, but rather there's another fire that they keep. And there's another fire that is the centerpiece of their reality, of their tribe, of their in-group. So these fires and who gets to control these fires is very prevalent in a lot of Indian cultures. It was very prevalent inside of the Aborigines, that the elders, in large part, in all the different tribes, they are the controllers of the fire, and that we generally have a younger person that is, dare I say, being groomed for a responsibility that is supposed to keep and make sure that the fire stays lit. In some cultures, in other cultures, we have the fire winds up getting used as like marriage ceremonies or whatnot. And then I know one of the Aborigines that is actually in the paper that's linked in the description, they take from the main fire camp and they light a stick. They pick a stick and it's lit, and they actually use that stick. That stick goes back to, it's like the sister-in-law or whatnot of the espoused to marry. I don't remember what the terms are, but this is a way of carrying the fire. And to some degree, we have anthropomorphized this carrying the fire in many, many different cultures as to carrying the purpose. And we see it prevalent in literature all through Shakespeare, all the way up to The Road, which I don't know that the movie is very good, but the book that is The Road, it actually centralizes this ideal of the fire too as being irreplaceable with the purpose, without calling it the purpose. In the father, I think, in The Road, calls the child and says that he has the fire in him. And at one point towards the end of the book, when the father's dying and he tells the child to keep on going, that he didn't want him to look back while he died, basically, the child crying asked, "Do I still have the fire?" And the father said, "Yes, you still have the fire." But the whole ideal of this, and we see it inside of the text of this book, as well as many others, is that in this case, the fire was in the boy for the father, that the whole purpose of him going on in this post-apocalyptic world was that the boy is still alive, and that was the father's purpose, was to continue and make sure that his son stayed alive. So in that, the fire was still inside of the boy. And I can't believe I just thought of that until now, but we see this in a lot of different literature, and we see this in a lot of different tribal interactions that this has happened, that fires are symbolic in huge ways, because we have so much history. We have so much history going all the way back into cavemen with the interaction of fire, and fire being necessary to keep us alive. Even John the Baptist talked about the one that comes after, I baptize you with water, but he'll baptize you with fire. And this in large part is interpreted by the Greek culture at the time, that he's baptizing you in glorious purpose, that you have reason. So this ideal alone is a constant connection of purpose and fire. And a specific fire, though, the campfire, the group fire, the collective fire, that this is the purpose, is to keep the group going and to keep the group alive. And many times these groups are represented in our mind as ideas, that we're just keeping ideas alive. The fire that is America, so to speak, the fire that is the things that we have founded on and that we believe in. So I think there's tremendous amount of association with this. And when we, even now, sit at a campfire along with friends, and the night comes and it's just us, especially if you're out in the mountains or whatnot, and there's just a handful of you, I think if you're ever in this situation, you get a sense of closeness with the group that you are there with at the campfire, that you feel more connected and more a part of the world, dare I say, at this campfire, because it is reminiscent of sensations that have existed for a very long time. And I think that campfire thing went on all the way, like I said, back to early man. Being there at the campfire gave us everything. And I think in large part now the sensation that we get, both from the collective and from the thing which provides life to us, we tend to anthropomorphize that thing into something larger. We have this ideal also that we wind up, when we become an adult, one of the biggest markers of becoming an adult is to surrender some component of our faculties to something that we think is larger than us. This happens not only when we gain a family, and we finally come out of these teenage years and these childish ideologies that we are the center of everything. We come to this conclusion that there is a thing that is more important to me. There's a thing that is more important than me, and whether that thing is family or whether that thing is the army. There are many people that get this sensation when they go into the army and they find a brotherhood and they find a group. We get this over and over with gangs, that they're a part of something bigger. And also inside of the context of all these things, we get an internal sensation of that we have to yield to or give to this thing, something of ourself. We have to render some faculties of ourself to this thing, almost a pledge to this thing, that we give up some measure of our autonomy to this thing. And whether that is the army, whether that is a gang, or whether that is your brothers in law enforcement and those with the shield, or whether this is something inside of the church, whether this is yielding something to a higher power. There is this aspect that I don't think that any of us are truly grown until we have changed the centerpiece that is us into the centerpiece that we think something bigger and more important exists than ourselves. So that seems to be quite central to growing up. And I think it's quite central to the ideal of purpose in the larger sense. Again, there's two types of purposes that we generally see here. We have the purpose that is to fulfill this larger contextual, again, like the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, seeing patterns, and trying to say that this is a part of something larger and holistic. There's that sensation of fulfilling purpose. And then there is the smaller thing of me individually and what it is that I have a purpose for and what I must achieve. That having been said, I'm going to put a video on here, and I did put the link in the description. I do hope I have the right video here. This is on Dr. Patrick McNamara. And give me a second. I'm going to get it on the screen here. Sorry about that. Having technical difficulties at this time. A few more minutes. I'm going to put a link in the description too, and we're going to have guests come onto the stage here, and we'll go from there. But I did want to put this video up first. If I ever can. There we go. Cooking with fire. Starting to. Let me make sure I'm muted here.
So a supernatural agent in general is an agent with special superhuman powers. They typically are disembodied, but not always. And the crucial thing is that they know what we're thinking and desiring. They have powers to heal and powers to curse. They tend to set up standards that human beings are expected to strive towards. And they tend to put human beings in a servile, petitionary stance. So we approach them with reverence, awe, fear, and all kinds of ceremonial rituals. We're always saying, please give us blessings and help, and then we'll sacrifice to you, we'll worship you, we'll organize our lives around you. What you find when you start to study the attributes and powers of supernatural agents, in particular in relation to individuals, is that the agentic sense of self, the executive self, gets diminished. So a natural.
I think that enough is alone. That was the main point that I wanted to cover. This agentic sense of self, our own personal autonomy and individuality, that there's always something that is, there's something that has to be yielded up to, that it has to be given to that. Let me see if I can close this thing. I need to get more experienced on this, on operating this damn thing. But that is something that regularly happens inside of all religions, it seems. That, and not just religions, any purpose that you commit yourself to, any purpose that you think is worth reaching a finality on, there is a sense of sacrifice. And I think that that's something that comes intuitively. And that's because when we have our own purposes, let's say let's shrink it down to that it's a goal. And maybe it's a goal that we know is one of the biggest goals and things that we will ever do in our entire life. Maybe it's something like climbing Mount Everest or something like this. We know that to achieve this ends, that there will be a sacrifice, there will be a cost that needs to be sunk in achieving this. And any goal that is worth achieving will come with cost. And this is something that life kind of teaches us little by little. Subsequently, when we think of grand purposes that are bigger than us, we tend to think of intuitively a sense of us sacrificing something to that larger, grander purpose. And this happens at multiple different scales. So this is how our dynamics interacts with larger characterages that we bend the knee to, so to speak, and we yield some faculties of ourselves to that thing as a sacrifice, to a larger, to a greater purpose in our minds. So that's how some of this is working. Then we have the other side of the purpose, which well, first of all, let me say this: in that larger purpose, if we don't have these deities, we can still have larger societal and social structure purposes that we set. And this is why many of us get involved in politics and political ideas, that we have a shape of a nation, a shape of a people, a shape of a society, and an ideal that we think is best for other people. And in that context, we can have this, whether spoken or unspoken, this larger ideal of how we want society to be. And to some degree, we are sacrificing, we're yielding to that. And in the decisions that we make, or maybe there's some bigger charities that we really like that charity, and we sacrifice to it, we give to it because we think it's important. We think that the charity is doing great work. We think these things are doing, that they're beneficial, and that they have been incorporated into the larger paradigm of what we consider our purpose. And then we have the smaller things that we have that is our purpose. We think of it not as a larger purpose, but a singular purpose for us. And more often than not, that is connected with the internal impulses of such as protecting our children, our family, the ones that we love, having a good relationship with them, being able to provide for our family. This time of year is Christmas, and we all of us that have kids, we want to make sure that our kids are happy. This is a big one for us. When this year comes, that it's not a disappointment for them, and that there is a nurturing of their hope and a nurturing of their happiness. And this is something that's important for us. It is purposeful to us. There is a sensation of purpose in it. And this is the smaller purpose. And what I find interesting is that when people think that we have a sensation towards purpose, it may very well be that the sensation that we have at the smaller scale is just to be purpose driven. The ideal that purpose has to be instilled at an evolutionary level to be successful for a singular purpose. It's not just like the beliefs that I was talking about earlier, that the beliefs can adjust and change, unlike the locked in neurological positions, such as you feeling the sensation to go down for water. Just like these neurological changes that you can make in your belief structure, and you believe this thing, and then you can change and believe a different thing because that thing is either more pragmatic for you, or you think it aligns more with that which you value, and maybe that which you value is truth, so you've changed it more, or you've changed it more this way just because it's more pragmatic. But the ability to change that belief is very beneficial for you. And subsequently, as evolution has evolved us, it may very well be the case that our sensations and our internal impulses for purpose might be something that is easily able to be changed, that there's an evolution for the engines of purpose, not so much for a specific purpose, but that rather we are compelled to be purposeful. We are compelled to latch on to meaningful things. And it doesn't matter what those meaningful things is. It doesn't really matter. We have the engines of purpose. And when we feel that we don't have some kind of purpose, there's not a specific purpose that we're missing. What we're missing is taking that engine of purpose and latching it on to something to make a purpose in our life. And if we don't have some purpose that we're latching on to, and maybe it's small goals, maybe it is something like climbing the Mount Everest, or something that is meaningful that we want to accomplish. Maybe it's a bucket list kind of thing that we say, I want to do this thing, I want to do that thing. And we latch on, we take our engines of purpose, and we make that thing the effort of our attention and the effort of our drive, and we accomplish it. And when we reach that accomplishment, it's like the old meme of Wile E. Coyote, or the coyote finally catching the roadrunner. Maybe then there's a sense of unsatisfaction once the purpose is acquired. But the great news is we can always detach that engine that is purpose and latch it to another thing. So we have these things that we can do inside of our lives that are meaningful inside of a temporal context. And then we have those things which are bigger, and maybe we'll commit our whole lives to, or a large part of our lives to. One thing that I could think of is seeing my children all grown and graduated. One thing that I could think of is walking my daughter down the aisle. That's a big one for me. And being able to get to that place where that finally happens. That is something that my engine of purpose has latched onto. It's important. I want to acquire that. Once that happens, I don't know what from there, but there's going to be some other purpose that I try to latch on to, and maybe it's smaller, meaningful purposes inside of their context. But this is how the phenomenal side of purpose is going on. I am going to place a link here in the description, see if anybody does want to come in. It doesn't look like today, and I know we're getting closer to Christmas, but it doesn't look like that we have many guests watching here. I think I see 2 listed, and I haven't seen anybody mention anything in chat yet. But I am still going to put the link up here because it is the formula that I run every time, and I am a slave to formula. So that having been said, if anybody does want to join and talk on this subject of purpose, whether you have something that you think is meaningful in a qualitative sense or in a larger sense that is purposeful to you, if you'd like to come in and talk about it and talk about your understanding of what purpose is, please, by all means, jump in. If you have any comments, please do leave some comments in the chat. Until someone does come in, though, or until we get some comments in the chat, I will be, I suppose, rambling on for a little bit longer here. So let me get a quick adjustment. Whoops. Sorry about that. I just realized I had it muted. I am going to slowly but surely be changing the format here. I do hope to have more and more guests come on. I hope the numbers increase here. If you are watching, I do encourage you to subscribe, give a thumbs up, hoping to grow the channel. I am interested in the philosophical side. I'm not interested so much in banging someone's head against the wall. Or approaching on someone's emotions or approaching on someone's beliefs of whatever thing that they believe. But I am interested in having conversations where we address things realistically, and we slowly but surely come out of dogmatic ideas, and we can discuss things more realistically inside of a philosophical context, inside a scientific context, and that we can begin to challenge some dogmatic ideas a little. That having been said, I think there are certain dogmatic ideas that until people are ready to release those dogmatic notions or those sensations or those feelings, those qualia of purpose, those qualia of experience, I don't think people step out of that until they're ready to step out of it. So that having been said, I will be looking out for different interlocutors or different guests to have on. Presently, next week, hope to have on Mr. Lord. I don't know anything more about him than that. Conversated him a little bit, I think, on a philosophy channel or on Based Atheism in Discord. And he has something of a self-described subjective objective model of ethics. So he hopes to come on and have a conversation. I don't know that it's so much a debate, but it is fleshing out our differences a little bit. I have hosted before, and we've had objective ethics on, which clearly has, as self-defined, an objective model. But I was more so just platforming and letting objective ethics speak and just doing a little bit of interview questions because he is going to have a debate coming up. And I do know that both of these models are inside of the sphere of regular atheist conversations. And I think that inside of the layman's regular conversation, the overwhelming consensus is on the subjective side. But I think when you reach into a philosopher level, you wind up having a lot of people that take an objective model, or not an objective model. I'm sorry. Objective is quite an outdated term. They don't use the term objective in either one of them. They use anti-realist versus realist because they don't couch it inside of objectivity per se, but things can be real in meaningful way that are not inside of an objective context. That having been said, I think it'll be an interesting conversation. He'll be on next Saturday. That'll be on the 27th, and we'll hash some of this out. We have presently quite opposing different views on it. And while I did just in large part just platform objective ethics to talk about the subject, this will be more of an interlocutor, more dare I say oppositional. I'm trying to find where we have common ground and our understanding and where we don't, but he'll be on next Saturday. That having been said, it looks like we don't have any people on presently watching this, and we might be cutting this one quite short. I know it is the holidays, and I knew that this was going to be a risk the whole time. That doing a show like this right now was going to be a risk because we are getting into, let me see if we can get his hat sideways there. We are getting into the holidays, and people are less and less concerned with having these conversations this time of year. Some people are traveling. People are far more interested in relaxing and having time with their family. So we're going to leave it open just for a few more minutes, and I think we're going to call it a wrap since we don't have anybody presently watching. And I thought for a moment that it might be my live stream that I have it set wrong, but that doesn't appear to be the case. Just looking at it, it appears to be working fine, and we don't have anybody coming in to watch, which is quite fine. It is that time of year. That having been said, we're coming up right at an hour, and I do believe that we're going to go ahead and close it up. If any of you are watching in the future, please stop by the 27th for the live stream where we'll have the conversation about objective morality versus subjective morality. I will be taking the subjective side of this, and we'll have something of an interlocutor Saturday, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. I do hope we have a little better turnout since the holidays will be a little farther along, but not